After touring around Europe with his band in the late 70s, Barry's illustrious career started in the early 80s with international chart toppers Brotherhood of Man. Then he became a UK top nightclub DJ whilst writing and producing for many famous hit artists. In the 90s, he turned to country music for inspiration and wrote worldwide hit 5, 6, 7, 8, leading to his formation of pop band Steps, who have now had numerous single and album chart success. After more hits with such diverse acts as Sonia, John Otway and the Cheeky Girls, plus a song in the double Oscar-winning film Little Miss Sunshine, Barry moved to the Sunshine Paradise of Thailand, where he's been presenting on radio and TV, as well as continuing to perform music live. His passion has always been songwriting, and this he successfully continues to do.
Sure enough, out from my fax machine comes this page, and there's Whitney Houston, there's Madonna, there's all these big acts in the top 10, and at number 1, Steps and 5, 6, 7, 8. Fabulous.
So were you tempted to try and form another music act?
Yeah. Well, the second round of Steps auditions, there was one girl who took my eye. Her name was Jo Jeffries, very sexy looking girl. She just failed to make it into the final lineup, and she was kind of like on the bench as a substitute in case one of the girls dropped out. But anyway, she calls me up a few months on and said that she just auditioned for Atomic Kitten, a band called Atomic Kitten, and she got into the group but didn't get on with the other girls. So all of a sudden there's 2 pop bands that she could have been with and failed at the final step, really, and I felt sorry for her. So while my partner Debbie was away, the mice will play, I got Jo down to our house and just talked over what we could do with her. Well, I found a few things to do with her, and one of them was to form a band. I mean, come on, I'm a Pop Tart, right? All these things go hand in hand. So we came up with the idea of maybe doing another Steps boy-girl type thing, but this time with 2 girls and 1 guy. And we called it Rocket, R-O-C-K-I-T. So I found another sexy girl that was looking to do something, and put them together. Plus I'd seen this black guy at line dance venues who was very, very charismatic, and he loved line dancing. He wore a cowboy hat and everything. So I thought maybe the 3 of them, him and 2 sexy girls, that's going to be a great lineup. So I put them together, did a couple of songs. I made a couple of very amateurish videos, but they served their purpose. And I was able to take the whole project to Simon Cowell again, who welcomed me with open arms. And actually, when I went into his office, the first thing I said to him, "Simon, just remind me, are you the guy who turned Steps down twice?" And it was a lovely moment. But no, he held his hands up and said, "Yeah, I didn't see where it was going to go, but you were right. They were a great pop act." So he was very open to listening to or seeing what I got to offer. And he just, I remember him telling me he just signed a band called the West Side. But they can't be called West Side because there's a rap act in New York called West Side, so they're going to be called Westlife. Anyway, he liked what I'd come up with, and I remember him giving me a Bananarama song, which hadn't been a hit, and he said, "Try recording that with them." So off I went, and now I had some production jobs coming in which were completely off the wall. And the funniest one was this guy called me up and said, "Listen, I've got the rights to a lot of Scottish music, the band of the Black Watch, the Scots Guards, and bagpipe music. Can you turn it into a line dance album, a Scottish line dance album?"
Swing, swing.
Well, you know, as I say, I was very reluctant to say no, so I had a go at it. And sure enough, it came out really, really funny and really, really good. I think it sold quite well in the line dance fraternity. And Jo, my new friend Jo, she did the artwork for the cover, and we called it Thistle Do by the Sporran Brothers. I was having fun with it.
What about your own party band, Wild at Heart?
Okay, so Wild at Heart, at that time, well, we were doing lots of military gigs and lots of high-so parties, weddings, things like that. And I've finally got a four-piece band now because Kevin had joined me. He loved to come and play guitar. And I had Debbie, my partner, plus I had this girl, Shelley, who she actually ran about the same time as I was auditioning for Steps. She came and auditioned for me for my Stars and Stripes duo. Young girl, 17, but very, very flamboyant and loved to dress spectacularly. And she loved doing the gigs with us. So I had a really nice band. There was Debbie, Shelley and Kevin. We were Wild at Heart, and I was living in a very nice house in a very high-so affluent area of Southampton, and had quite big grounds. Sometimes you get reindeer coming up, and I just loved looking out the window and saying, "Oh, darling, it looks like reindeer." And then I was being bombarded with pop acts that wanted me to produce them or try and get them record deals. One was a group called the Three Sisters, actually, and we called them Sisterhood. And they were a very, very good act, very, very good singers, but they just didn't have that oomph to rehearse and make it that bit special. But I did try. And then there was another band called Waikiki, and we called them Waikiki because there was a friend of mine who was a guitar player, and he was teaching at the Guitar Institute, and he said there's a lot of good musicians here and a lot of good female musicians. So I said, well, let's put a female band together, and how about a surf band, because I just loved surf music. And he said, okay, you know, we could make it very beachy, and the girls can be dressed in the latest surf gear. And we did. We got sponsored by a surf fashion house. They sent us a whole load of clothes, and the girls were good. They actually went out and did some concerts on festivals and things, and so they could actually play live. And eventually I made a single with them called Let's Go Surfing, and it was like a medley of all the famous surf hits, and then wrote a bunch of songs as well. And eventually we promoted them through Music Week and had the motto, "The sound of surf never looked so good." And we almost got a deal. Epic Records were ready to sign them, and they wanted to come and see a showcase. And would you believe it, just before they're going to do this showcase which could land them the record deal, they imploded. So one of the rehearsals, one of the girls got angry with the singer. I think it was the guitarist got angry with the singer and was almost throttling her. And so the singer walked out, or the guitarist walked out, I can't remember. But it all imploded, and we didn't get that deal. And Honda had sponsored Waikiki, and we were using this vehicle to transport them around the country. And I really loved it. I really loved the car. So when I took it back, I just said, I think this is fabulous. They said, well, you know, have it.
What about those Steps royalties? Coming in already?
Yes, and I started spending a little bit. First of all, I kept noticing if the checks come in and they go into the bank, you know, nothing really happens. You don't have a celebration. So I had my own private celebration by going down to the guitar shop and buying another guitar. That became something that's still with me today. I still love it to celebrate a royalty check by going out and buying something. Anyway, I used it. I used some of the money to good effect. I took my sister's sons. My sister didn't have a lot of money, so her and her husband weren't able to do amazing things for their sons. But I thought, well, I can take them to Disneyland in Paris. So I took Debbie and her son Ian and my nephews. Took them over there, gave them a great time, took them up the Eiffel Tower. And then on my return, Brian, who's my sister's husband, I think he was a bit jealous of my newfound wealth, and he had a really good go at me, and eventually had a go at me about making that Scottish line dance album. And he used to be in the military, so he didn't like the fact that I'd used military music and turned it into pop. But like I tried to explain to him, well, you've got an option. You can listen to the original military music, or you can listen to my remixed version. You've got a choice, but he didn't like that, and he threw me out the house. And then Debbie, she was seeing this money coming in and thought, wow, you know, I've got a wedding business. Maybe you could invest some money into that. I really didn't want to do that. So there were kind of pressures on me from her about the money that was coming in.
Then I believe you wrote a few hits in LA.
Yes, there's this amazing magazine run by a guy called David Stark, longtime friend. The magazine's called Songlink, and they try to marry people up to write songs with each other, or find placement for songs, or tell you who is looking for songs. It's a very useful mag, and there was this guy who contacted me through the magazine called Gordon Pagoda, who lived in Los Angeles, and he loved my pop writing. He loved some of my hits that I'd had already, and he wanted to write with me. So he said, "Are you coming to LA at any time?" And I said, "Well, actually, I feel like having a break now. I feel like having a holiday, so I could come almost immediately." And then I phoned Jo Jeffries up and asked if she'd like to come with me to accompany me on the trip, which she jumped at. And so off we went to LA. I did write 4 songs with Gordon, and all 4 ended up being used in either TV or film. More about that a bit later. Or they became hits a bit later on. And then while I was there, I decided, well, let's take a few days out and have a vacation with Jo. And then when I returned, Debbie hit the roof because she found 2 cinema tickets in my back pocket. And so she knew something had gone on. She thought it was some record company executive that I'd met on the plane, which I told her about. But she got it all wrong. Anyway, it all came back to haunt me, because we're now at the end of 1999, going into 2000, and so that Millennium Night, I was invited to play at this HISO event, and they were paying me a lot of money to organise the music for the whole night. So that's the disco, the band, and it really was a good earner. So it's a very important event, a very important gig.
Okay.
And would you believe it, Debbie let me down on the very night. I'm there actually with the equipment setting up, and I get the call from Kevin, who was going to pick her up, and he says she's not going to come. So I quickly got on the phone to Jo. Sure enough, she was up. Well, she was up for doing the gig. She had a bit of a cold, but nevertheless, her and her mother came, and then we got paid extra to do a little bit more after midnight, which was it was a great evening. It really was. It turned out to be a great evening, but I had to realise that myself and Debbie were really finished for a second time.
Okay, so now it's the year 2000. What was your next move?
Well, move is the operative word, because I knew I had to move, and I had to find somewhere to move my studio to. But Shane Ritchie called me up to wish me Happy New Year, and I said, well, it's not really that much of a Happy New Year, I've got to move. And he said, well, why don't you move in with me? I'm breaking up with Colleen, and there's Paul Spong, who's the trumpet player, I knew Paul from the days of Wham. He's a top session trumpet player. He's living with me there. Got a big house, and he says, "Bring your studio up to my house." So I wasn't too sure, but anyway, I went up one day and had a cup of tea with him and had a look round. Sure enough, there was this big basement area in his house, which is called the Manor, and I just thought, well, this would be ideal for a studio. So I did. I moved everything up there, and I made an album with Shane. We wrote a couple of songs, and he already had some songs that he wanted to do. So, and the great thing was, because Paul was there, Paul Spong, a lot of his session mates were all top brass players. And so whenever they passed by, we'd get them down in the studio, and it really was a good mood to go there. Although it was sometimes, as you could imagine, it was a bit like men behaving badly. But what happened at the Manor stays at the Manor.
Then I believe, in true Barry Upton style, you changed a negative into a positive.
Yes, in true Barry Upton style. I'd managed to lose my license, my driving license, because I'd accumulated too many speeding tickets. And so I'd got a 6-month ban. Oh, how do you turn that into a positive? Well, you get in a blonde bombshell, Jo. She became my driver. So do you remember that Beatles song, "Baby, you can drive my car"? I kept singing that all the time because it was just like that. She was my chauffeur and my driver. And so she was with me a lot of the time at various events and different things, different places I was going to. She was with me. That was very rock and roll. And it got even more rock and roll because there was a period of time where I was producing a girl called Karen, who was originally in Bucks Fizz, and she lived in Glasgow. Anyway, she wanted to do a country album. I had a lot of country songs, and so I started producing some songs with her. Now, Karen lived in Glasgow, and I'd already gotten a bit closer to her than I should have done when I was living with Debbie. So I used to catch the plane, the EasyJet, that's it, from Luton up to Glasgow. It's like catching a bus. And in doing so, Jo would drop me off at Luton Airport, and Karen would pick me up at Glasgow Airport. So I had a blonde dropping me off and a blonde picking me up. I mean, do you want to get any more rock and roll than that? And I remember when we was in Glasgow once, she knew Graham Clark from Wet Wet Wet, so Graham invited us over for dinner, and I got on great with him. We were both Beatles fans, so we had a great time. And I kind of taken my pop tartiness to a new level, I know, but it was fantastic. I was having great fun. Took Karen to Barbados, and we were driven to Gatwick Airport by Jo. I know.
Then you got some divine inspiration.
Very good. A comedian friend of mine called Russ Williams, he knew of these girls. I think 2 of them were sisters, and then one of them was a friend. They were 17 years old, and they were looking to become a pop act, and they needed some songs, they needed production. Anyway, I went to see them, and I thought, yeah, they've got potential. And I suddenly thought, well, why don't I do like a Supremes thing with them? With one of them had got a very soulful voice. We could do like a Motown style type thing, and call them Inspiration. So yeah, there's the divine inspiration. But I remember when they came to rehearse at the Manor, Shane came in one day, and he looked at me, he looked at them, and he just says, "Barry, you're nothing but a musical prostitute. You're just a Pop Tart." And that's where the label came from. I said to him, "I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. I can't argue with that."
So how long did you spend living at Shane's house?
I think it was about a year, although I was going backwards and forwards to Southampton a lot, still mixing with the crowd down there. And Debbie had wormed her way back into my favours. It seems that a year previously we'd booked a holiday with a bunch of friends, a bunch of couples, to go to Club Med in Turkey. So I honoured it, and and we decided that we'd make up for a week or two, and we would go together. And there I met a bunch of Russian girls for the first time in Turkey, and I'd never really come across Russian girls before, but they were so good looking. And so I'd be wandering away from the area that we were having drinks in and stuff, and go over to their pool and have a drink or two with a couple of those. Anyway, I ended up with the phone number, or the email address, I think it was, of one of them, and we kept in contact. But then in December, I think it was December of the year 2000, I moved back to Southampton. I decided, no, I've spent far too long at Shane's house now. I want to go back to Southampton, so I found a house that I liked and moved my studio down there. Actually, then I was going to be changing and going from an analog studio to a digital studio. So it was kind of like I sold my old desk while I was at Shane's and bought a whole new digital system and put it into the new house.
And then in your book you describe 2001 as a sex odyssey.
What can I say? I was a Pop Tart extraordinaire. I was getting plenty of gigs, I was getting big royalties. The world was my lobster at that time. I got my new digital studio. I was fraternising with Debbie from time to time. I had this girl from Bridlington who had found me online and wormed her way into my favours. And she came to Meedem with me. She was my assistant, really, at the Meedem Trade Festival in January. And then I came back and I met a girl called Linda who was selling properties in Spain, southern Spain. So I used to accompany her on free trips down to Torrevieja, I think it was. And while she's selling the properties, I'm just enjoying being in Spain. But while I was with her, I did actually speak to her about the daughter, which I knew about, but I'd never met. And I thought, she's the same age as this band that I'm producing, Inspiration. She's 17 now. And every time I saw the band Inspiration, I kept thinking, I wonder what my daughter looks like, or is she going to knock on my door one day? So I did make inquiries as to whether I should contact her or not. And it seemed that if you wrote a letter to her mother and her mother deemed it okay, then she would give the letter to her daughter, and that's exactly what happened. And one day I got a phone call, or I got a text, that's it was text. It said, hello Barry, or shall I call you Dad? Oh, that was a weird moment. So we did meet up, and the first time I met her, I took her to one of Inspiration's live appearances. And so she got on well with them, and it kind of made things just that little bit easier. And I took her to a few pop festivals that were happening about that time, so I was able to introduce her to acts like Blue and Louise. I introduced her to Lisa from Steps, who I saw backstage at one of the gigs. The most difficult thing about that moment was really telling my mum, because my mum knew nothing about it. But I sat her down, it was a sunny day one day, and I broke the news to her over a cup of tea, and she looked at me and said, well, I'm just surprised there's not more. I was so relieved. I thought, oh good. So that was out of the way. And then an old friend from Denmark, who a girlfriend I'd had in the 70s, late 70s, Annetta, she suddenly called me out of the blue. She suddenly got my phone number somehow or other. And I thought, it'd be lovely to see her again. So I jumped on a flight to Denmark, and we kind of rekindled our relationship a little bit. And she came to the UK, to Southampton, stayed with me for a while. I had a bit of fun with her. And then the Russian girl who I'd met on the Club Med trip, and we kept in contact. She finally managed to get a visa to come over. She was actually from Kazakhstan, not Russia, but the former USSR country of Kazakhstan. But she looked like a beautiful blonde Russian, and she came over for I think about 10 days, and we got on like a house on fire. We really did. It was just so fantastic, and I loved her accent, and we just had a lot of fun. Then she went back to Kazakhstan, so Annette would come over from Copenhagen and come and see me again in the UK. Then she'd go back, and then Elena would come. So in, out, shake it all about. But the second time that Elena came, she played a little bit of saxophone. So I went and bought one. The next minute, I had her playing in my band, Wild at Heart, as an additional member, so she could come to the gigs and actually take part in the gigs. Things were hotting up between us.
So who was now in your band?
Okay, well, Wild at Heart had now progressed to being a 5-piece party band. I'd got a lovely girl called Kelly who was really funny, and she got on so well with Shelley, so she'd replaced Debbie, who obviously wasn't doing gigs with us anymore. And so I had Kelly and Shelley. I had Elena, who was the girl from Kazakhstan, and a strange but reliable percussionist stroke roadie. And he was claiming benefits, so he relished the thought of coming out to earn some extra money with the band as a roadie, and he'd play a bit of percussion. So that was kind of like the band, and it was a very settled, and we enjoyed each other's company. We ran like clockwork. All the gigs went like clockwork, and it was a happy family. And it was about this time that my accountant said, "You're earning a lot of royalties here. You need to spend some of this money." And I said, "Well, yeah, I've been thinking about leasing a van, or like a nice luxury van for the band, because I've been using everything packed into a trailer and pulling it along behind my car." And he said, "But just go out and buy the best Transit you can find," he says, because of the financial benefits of it all, which is all to do with creative accounting. But anyway, I did go out and buy a luxury Transit, and it made our gigs even more fun.
Then you met up with former long-term girlfriend Janie.
Yes, this was at a Tommy Ayres benefit at the Café de Paris, because Tommy Ayres was the keyboard player in Wham. He also played with a little bit of help from my friends, with Joe Cocker, very famous keyboard player. And unfortunately, he had terminal cancer. So some of his friends wanted to put together a benefit concert for him. And Shane Ritchie called me up and said, Paul Spong's going to be playing on it. I'm going to be doing it. Would you do some backing vocals and maybe play a bit of rhythm guitar, acoustic guitar? When he told me who else was going to be on the bill, I couldn't turn it down. Martin Fry from ABC was going to be singing, Hamish Stewart from the Average White Band, and on backing vocals was also going to be Janie, my former girlfriend, who is now called Janie Lee Grace, and she was the cohort with Steve Wright on Steve Wright in the Afternoon. I didn't know how we were going to get on, but we did get on famously. We were so at ease with each other, and the only problem was that she had a long-term boyfriend, and she was about to get married to him. And in fact, she actually booked my band to play at her wedding, which was a little bit weird, because although I was enjoying being there and glad to see that she was so happy, but I just kept feeling that should have been me.
And then Dubai came calling.
Yes. Barbara, who was a friend of mine from Southampton, and she'd sung with me quite a few times, she needed somebody to do a gig with her out in Dubai. She had a friend who, I think it was her 40th birthday or something, and she said she wanted Barbara to sing at her big spectacular party. Her friend was very high-so there. So we flew out first class to Dubai, and the party was in two sections. There was the night before the big party, the big public party where we were going to play. She had a private party at the Burj Al Arab, which is was the only 7-star hotel in the world at that time. And we got picked up by white Rolls Royces, taken to the Burj Al Arab, and wined and dined in one of the most spectacular suites. I mean, it was just a spectacular hotel. We had a wonderful time there, very drunken, and spent like had a bit of a holiday while I was there, and I was really amazed at how Dubai was growing so much. And it did go into our brain at one point, this might be a good place to live. I went back there about a month later because Elena, who was my Russian girl from Kazakhstan, she could get a visa very easily to come into Dubai. So I met her in Dubai and we had a holiday there. And I really was thinking, maybe this is the place, this could be the future for me.
By the end of 2001, Steps had disbanded after 4 successful studio albums, then 3 compilation hit albums and 17 hit singles. The group sold over 20 million records worldwide. You must have been benefiting.
Wow, okay, for sure. And what happened was I made my mum a secretary of the company because I wanted her to have a wage. I wanted her to benefit from my company. She never liked to take anything, but I said to her, look, if you're officially the secretary and I need a secretary, you will get a wage. And it just helped her with getting taxis instead of buses to shopping and just simple things like that. So it made her life easier. At that time, there was a school reunion that I went to up in Luton, and I did meet a lot of the people who I went to school with who just got such dull lives, and when I was speaking to them about what I did, it's just a world away from those times. I was just a totally different person to them.
2002 was a very successful year for you, and it started with an unusual offer from the sports company Reebok.
Yeah, there was this girl called Susan Bilardi who was a top spin trainer in the USA, and she contacted me regarding making a CD for Reebok, some music for spin is like cycling, it's like a cycling exercises. So we communicated backwards and forwards, and then she said, well, why don't you come over to Washington DC, which is where our centre is and where I am. And I thought, well, if I'm going to go there, I'll go via New York. I'll go to New York City first. And I found out that Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys was doing a gig at B.B. King's Blues Bar. I thought, I'm going to go there. So I did. And I actually ended up meeting Brian Wilson because I got there very early, saw him at the sound check, and then he walked off the stage and was starting to walk towards the bar. So I went up and said hello, never miss an opportunity. And he was really nice and walked up to the bar with me. We had a drink together and he posed for a picture. His manager came over to see if I was someone bothering him, but no, he was fine. As soon as he started talking about music, because he'd had some mental problems, but as soon as you started talking music with him, he was just there with you in the moment. So that was an amazing experience. And then I saw the David Letterman show and ended up being on the David Letterman show as part of the audience. Just outside, we got taken outside and they were filming a piece just outside the Ed Sullivan Theatre. And I was a big David Letterman show fan, so that was a thrill as well. Then I got the train to Washington DC via Philadelphia and met up with Susan Bilardi, and lovely girl. We had a great time together. We got closer than close, and she showed me the White House. And let's face it, I was a Pop Tart, right? So yeah, I had a nice time there. Turned out she was a big friend of John Bon Jovi, and she said that if you come here and you want to record here, you can probably use John Bon Jovi's studio. So this was getting really serious.
What a Pop Tart you were. Now about John Otway, how did you start working with him?
Ah yes, the lunacy of Otway. Well, Debbie, who I'd been seeing for a while after she'd had a little fling with the the one and only Jim Davidson. She said she knew John Otway because she went to school with him. So she introduced me one night. We went to one of his gigs and introduced me to him. And he was quite taken that I'd got a studio and I'd had hits. And he'd got a 50th birthday coming up, and his fans always like to buy him something for his birthday. And this year they really wanted to get him in the charts and buy him another hit somehow or other. Anyway, fast forward to this particular time when I was actually with Elena, and we went over to the Isle of Wight to see the Naughty Rhythms tour, and John Otway was on that with Canned Heat, if I remember rightly. And afterwards, we decided to stay at the same hotel as the band and John Otway. And so after the gig, we were in the hotel bar getting drunk with John Otway, and I finally said to him, I don't think your albums have been produced very well. And he said, well, you have a go. Come on, you have a go at producing me. And I drunkenly agreed. So we met up a few times and wrote a few songs together and started planning for his 50th, which was going to be at the end of 2002, October time. A variety of songs we wrote, and mostly from John Otway's amazing use of the English language. He wrote some great lyrics, and I was able to do the musical side of it and produce things that sounded that they could be hits. And one of the songs was a song called Bunsen Burner, which was a poem that John had been reciting at some of his gigs, and he said he wrote it for his daughter's homework just to see what kind of mark he might get. And so I just suddenly thought, you know what, we could actually make something of that poem and maybe make a song around it. At the time, I think it was the Sugar Babes had just come out with a song using the riff from Our Friends Electric. So I thought we could do Burn Baby Burn and take the riff from that particular song and put the poem over the top of it. And so anyway, we messed around with it and eventually came up with something that sounded quite unusual. And I got Janie to come in down and sing some backing vocals on it. And I always remember we finished the session and then she said, can we just go for a drink or something? So I said, yeah, let's go for something to eat. And then she apologised to me for the way she treated me in the early 80s. And if you remember, I really got cut up a lot about that, and it took me years and years to get over it. And there she was now apologising for her behaviour. Anyway, the Otway Big Band, they weren't too sure about some of the songs that I was doing, and they were a little bit dubious. They thought it was a bit too poppy, but for me, that's what was missing from. And also, John Otway's live persona was never captured properly on record, and I thought, yeah, I think I can do that. So I went with the big band and we recorded the B-side, which was going to be House of the Rising Sun, the way that he does it live, which if anyone who's seen John Otway live, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And we recorded it at Abbey Road. And then when the fans voted on what should be the single, and Bunsen Burner became the clear winner. And so it was promotion time. Now, it turns out that Johnny Walker, who was a DJ on Radio 2, was a big John Otway fan, and he loved it, so he played it nearly every night. So we thought maybe if all the fans go out and buy it on the same day, we could make the top 40 or maybe top 30, you never know. But because of Johnny Walker's playing it on the radio all the time, there's all these closet Otway fans that came out from all over the country, and it became a big hit record. It was top 10, and it was really funny because it came out on 3 CDs. I did all these different mixes of Bunsen Burner, plus we added some of the extra tracks on different CDs. So really and truly, to get the whole package, you had to buy 3 CDs, not just one. And I remember the night before it was actually released, we were doing a gig in Sheffield, and the funny part was at the end of the gig The idea was to have a conga line that went through the venue, out into the street, and then down to HMV, I think it was, or Virgin Records. I think it was HMV, who had decided to open their doors at midnight, and just especially for the John Otway fans. It was all pre-arranged, and sure enough, there's a big long queue outside HMV at midnight. They opened the doors, and everybody piled in, buying the CD. So I just couldn't believe it. They were just flying off the shelf. And about an hour later, about 1 o'clock in the morning, it must have been number one at that particular time. But that was before all other records or anybody had a chance to buy any other CDs. So on the day that the chart was announced, John had previously booked the London Palladium, which is usually down, dark on a Sunday. And Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was there. We saw all of their scenery backstage, but we had the Palladium for the evening. So the first half was basically friends of John Otway, Wild Willie Barrett. There was myself and Janie. I managed to get Inspiration because they were on one of the tracks, actually featured on one of the tracks. And so the first half was a potpourri of Otway Otway friends of Otway, and then the second half was the Otway Big Band, which included me. But to start the whole show off, Johnny Walker came on stage and he read the new top 10 out to an unsuspecting London Palladium audience. And of course, when he got to number 9 and it was Bunsen Burner, the place just erupted. And the manager after the gig said, the manager of the Palladium said he'd never heard noise like it in the Palladium. It's just amazing, it really was. Then of course we did Top of the Pops. Did a radio show with James Whale, I think we did. And then we did Top of the Pops, yes. But one funny story that came out of it was that in the green room, there were other bands on. There was Bowling for Soup, I remember, Badly Drawn Boy, Christine Aguilera, and there was a guy I got talking to in the green room who was American, and I said, so which band are you with? And he says, oh, well, I'm Justin Timberlake. And I went, yeah, which band's that then? I knew nothing about Justin Timberlake, I really didn't. And I told that story to friends and their kids afterwards. They just looked at me in disbelief. How could you not know who Justin Timberlake was? Anyway, he was good. He laughed about it and just told me who he was.
And while all this was happening, you were preparing to get married. Yes,
and for all the wrong reasons. The problem was that Elena now was kind of established in my life, and her visa was about to run out. Her engagement, she was on an engagement visa with me now, and you only allowed that for 6 months. So basically we had to get married, and plus my mother had never seen me get married. I thought it'd be nice for her, so we did. We got married. The day before her visa ran out, we had to bomb up to Croydon the next day and get her visa renewed. But at that time, I was still working on the Spin CD. So I was going backwards and forwards to America. And just after I got married, I went to Washington, DC again. I didn't really want to get married in my life. And I was doing this Spin CD and recording it and going backwards and forwards to Washington, DC. Mainly because Susan Bilardi had got a clause into me now. And I don't know, I was just torn between all the things that were going on. Anyway, just before I got married, on the flight home from the United States, I kind of made a decision. I really should try and have a bit of stability in my life, so I will get married. So I did it, and it was a very nice day. And I think it was a kind of happy occasion. And then just after the marriage, I had to go to Washington DC again, and Susan Bilardi had bought tickets to see the Rolling Stones. I couldn't let her down, so I went with her, and I kind of let her know that I think we've got to finish this. And so I flew back home and then got an email from John Bon Jovi saying, "Slimy, you don't know what you've done to her, and working in the US may not be a good thing." It was just so funny. I couldn't believe this. So I did reply back to him. I said, "Hey, Rockstar, can you mind your own business, please?" So me and John Bon Jovi, I'm sure we would laugh at it now, or maybe not. Anyway, I had not taken Elena on a honeymoon, so I thought, okay, I should do this. So we went to Tenerife, and then Elena said that she wanted to start a beauty business, and she needed to go to beauty college for a year. So I financed that, and it was like sending a daughter off to school every day. That's what I felt in my mind anyway. And then we went to Almaty in Kazakhstan, which is the capital of Kazakhstan, to see her parents. I hadn't met her parents, you know. We had a video that her parents had sent of them celebrating her getting married. But I thought, yeah, it would be nice to go out. And I've never been to Kazakhstan, so something new. So off we went to the former USSR country. And Almaty, the capital, very nice in the center. It was almost a little bit French in tree-lined streets, but the outskirts looked very Russian and very sort of concrete junglish. But there was a lot of beautiful girls there, I remember. I know I shouldn't be looking, but I'm a man after all. And there were some stunning girls there. But the highlight for me was when we went up in a ski lift up into the mountains. It was just beautiful. It really was wonderful. And I'll never forget coming down the ski lift. As we're coming down, the ones that are going up the mountain are passing us like this. And I just remember seeing probably the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen in my life. But she just passed me like that. Anyway, I'm married, all right? I have to remember that.
Then you had some success with your local football club, Southampton FC.
Yeah, following the John Otway success, what was it now? About March 2003, and my local team, Southampton Football Club, were doing quite well in the FA Cup. And someone had said to Sky Sports Fan Zone that I would be good on Fan Zone. I think it might have been Mike Osman, I'm not sure. But anyway, they called me up and said, would you like to do Fan Zone? And I used to watch that on the red button. Whenever a match was on, you could get a fan from each team, and you could cut out the commentator and have the two fans bantering to each other. And it was always really funny, so I thought, yeah, I'd love to take part in that. So I did the quarterfinal, which I remember was against Wolves, and that was really funny, up at the Sky Centre in is it Twickenham Way, somewhere like that, and got paid for it as well, which was brilliant. And then they said, well, they're in the semi-final, would you like to do it again? So how could I refuse? And I did that one. That was Southampton against Watford. So then Southampton were in the cup final, which meant, shall I do a record for them? And I contacted the club, and they said nobody else was doing one. So I said, well, can I do one? They said, yeah, but you can't put official on it, that's all. So I said, okay. But they were quite happy for me to do whatever I wanted. So I went and recorded the fans singing When the Saints Go Marching In. And I thought that'd be great, because if the fans are on the record, they're bound to buy it. Also, they'd probably be more likely to buy it if Matt Letizia, who was a complete Southampton legend, if he was doing something on it. So I got in contact with the club and told them what I wanted to do. They got in contact with Matt. Next minute, Matt's on the phone to me. Yeah, what would you like me to do? I said, well, just do, I'll write like a kind of rap or something. You know, he says, well, you know I can't sing. I said, you can really play football though. So anyway, after training, he came over and we put something down, and the final result was a CD of Southampton fans, that's it, Southampton supporters featuring MC Latiz. Well, it sold like hotcakes. I sold about 8,000. But I did make one mistake. When I manufactured them, I didn't put a barcode on them, so I had to go and get stickers made with a barcode on for Sainsbury's, for Asda, for all the local shops that were going to be selling it. And spent a couple of nights sticking every CD. I had to put a sticker on every CD. And I distributed it myself, I produced it myself, I suppose I wrote the song myself, and sold 8,000. It was great.
So 2003 was shaping up in an interesting way.
Yes, and something that was very interesting was that I got asked to go and do another show in Dubai with Barbara again. This time it was for the launch of OK Middle East magazine, and she knew the guy, the publisher, and he said, well, I'd love you to sing, and she said, well, can I bring my partner singing? And he's got a wife who plays saxophone. So they paid for us both to go out there, and we stayed at the most amazing hotel, the Madinat Jumeirah, I think it was. Yes, and did the gig. We only had to play for 20 minutes. I remember Elena was in, this place has got kind of like riverways and like little boats, electric boats that go around these rivers. And she was playing on one of those. We were on the stage. We did 20 minutes, that's all, and just had the most fantastic trip.
Then there was the Welsh National Opera.
Who could have thunk it? Now, it gets more and more bizarre, this story, because John Shearer, a friend of mine who was the top orthopaedic surgeon at Southampton General, he was also a lyricist, and he got together with an orchestral composer, and they were writing a rock opera. Anyway, he calls me up and says, how can we make a demo of this? And I realised that the composer was probably composing on a new computer program called Sibelius. And I said, well, you don't have to go to the expense of getting an orchestra. He can bring the Sibelius down to my studio. We can put the backing track down, and then you just need vocalists. So that's exactly what they did. And who did they get in to do the vocals? 3 members of the Welsh National Opera, who just happened to be performing at the Mayflower Theatre in Southampton. And I mean, these singers were just the top of their tree, unbelievable opera singers. And they read the music, they didn't need any rehearsal. They just read the parts off of the music, incredible voices. And afterwards they invited myself and Elena to the Mayflower, to the opera. I mean, I've never been an opera fan. I didn't really understand it, but by the end of the evening I did understand more about how the story is kind of immaterial. It's just a way of gluing together some kind of reason for these vocalists to show off how good they are. But it was a great evening and an amazing experience to have singers of that quality in my studio.
So was your life more stable now? No more pop-tarting around?
Yeah, well, I was getting many well-paid gigs with Wild at Heart, doing really well, and I was kind of taking a break from the Pop-Tart thing, and it was a bit of a relief. And I had a stable marriage, and we were having a good time together.